Chapter 1. The sentence in one line. I still remember the exact tone in my mother's voice that night. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was casual, almost careless. Yet it sliced through me like glass. "You're on your own now." She said it while folding a dish towel, like she was announcing the weather. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and burnt toast. The overhead light made everything look pale, flat. My parents, the walls, even me. I was standing with an envelope in my hands, still sealed. It was my first letter of recognition from the university. Proof I'd made the dean's list. I'd thought maybe, just maybe, this was the thing that would make them proud. But before I could open my mouth, she dropped that sentence into the air like a lead weight. My father didn't look up from his newspaper. He just turned the page, as though nothing worth hearing had been said. The heat in my chest spread slowly, like a slow burn. I'd always known I was the family afterthought, but hearing it so plainly felt different, final, official. I wanted to ask what she meant, but the words stuck in my throat like dry bread. They didn't wait for me to speak. My mother walked past me into the living room, where the TV hummed softly. My father followed, his slippers making that slow, dragging sound on the hardwood. The envelope felt heavier in my hands now. I sat at the table alone, staring at the blue ink of my name on the envelope. It almost looked like it belonged to someone else, someone worth keeping. I pressed my thumbnail under the flap, but stopped. Suddenly, I didn't want them to see me open it. That night, I didn't cry. I just lay in bed with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, replaying those 4 words over and over. "You're on your own now." It wasn't a warning. It was a verdict. By morning, the verdict became reality. There was no breakfast waiting, no small talk, no ride offered to campus. Just my father's muttered "doors unlocked" as he left for work. I packed my books into my bag and walked. It was a gray November morning in Philadelphia, damp and cold. The kind of day where the sky feels heavy enough to crush you. I pulled my coat tighter, but the chill got in anyway. I told myself it was just the wind making my teeth clench. On the bus, I looked out at rows of brick houses, each with their own secrets behind the curtains. I wondered if other kids my age knew what it was like to feel orphaned while their parents were still alive. Somehow, that thought hurt more than I expected. At the library between classes, I opened the envelope. The words on the page confirmed what I already knew. I was doing well. Top 5% of my class. But instead of pride, all I felt was the echo of my mother's voice. By the end of the week, I made a decision. I wouldn't beg for a place in their lives anymore. If they didn't want to claim me now, they wouldn't get to claim me later, when it mattered. It was a vow I made quietly, but it settled deep. That vow became my compass. Every extra shift I worked at the campus cafe, every late night at the library, every paper I double-checked, it all had a silent audience in my mind. An audience that had turned away. I wasn't working just for grades anymore. I was building proof. Proof that I could stand without them. Proof that their absence didn't define my limits. One day, I thought, they'll see. And when they do, they'll see it from a distance. By the end of that semester, I had 2 jobs, straight A's, and no reason to go home for the holidays. When people asked about my family, I learned to keep my answers short. Complicated, I'd say. It was easier than explaining the truth. That truth stayed locked up inside me, like the letter I never showed them. But under the lock, something was growing, stubborn, unshakable. It wasn't hate. Not yet. It was the first spark of freedom. Chapter 2. The city that teaches you to survive. Philadelphia was big enough to swallow you whole if you weren't careful. The sidewalks were cracked, the traffic constant, and the air smelled faintly of gasoline and fried food. It wasn't a place that offered comfort. It offered challenge. and I was ready for it. I moved into a room above a laundromat. The walls were thin, and the hum of the machines below was constant. Sometimes the smell of detergent mixed with steam drifted up through the vents. It was better than the silence I'd left behind. Rent was $500 a month, cheap for the city, expensive for me. I balanced it by working mornings at the cafe and nights shelving books at the library. Between shifts, I carried my life in a backpack. Textbooks, a change of clothes, and snacks I couldn't afford to waste. The first winter was brutal. Wind tunneled down the streets, turning my fingers numb even through gloves. I learned to move quickly, head down, body angled against the cold. The city didn't care if you were tired. It kept moving. Some days, the loneliness was heavier than my backpack. I'd watch people through the cafe windows, laughing over coffee, their conversations full of warmth. I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed like that with anyone in my family. At night in my tiny room, I studied with my back against the radiator. The heat clanked on and off, never steady, but it was enough. I told myself every hour spent reading, every note I took, was a brick in the foundation of my escape. Money was always tight. I clipped coupons, hunted for grocery sales, and made soup from bones and vegetables past their prime. It wasn't glamorous, but I never went hungry. I refused to let myself fall apart. Weekends weren't for rest. They were for extra hours at work. The cafe manager liked me because I never complained, even when customers snapped or spilled drinks. Every tip, every dollar went into the same envelope under my bed, my safety net. Sometimes I'd pass by the university's grand event hall, lights spilling from the tall windows. Inside, students from wealthy families mingled at galas, dressed in suits and gowns. I kept walking. That wasn't my world. Not yet. Still, I couldn't help imagining it. What it would feel like to be invited in. Not as a guest clinging to the edge, but as someone the whole room was there to celebrate. That image burned quietly in my mind. Classes were my anchor. Every lecture, every assignment was proof I was moving forward. When grades came in, I didn't tell anyone back home. I'd learned the hard way they weren't interested. This victory was mine alone. One rainy afternoon, I got caught without an umbrella. By the time I reached the library, my coat was soaked through. I sat in the stacks, shivering, flipping through pages while water dripped from my sleeves. It felt miserable and alive at the same time. That was the thing about the city. It didn't care if you succeeded or failed. It simply tested you, over and over, until you either hardened or disappeared. I chose to harden. I started networking without even realizing it. Talking to professors after class, staying late to help at events, offering to cover shifts for coworkers. Every name I learned, every small favor returned, felt like another door cracked open. But I never forgot the reason I was here. Every late night on the bus, every time I dragged myself home after midnight, I pictured my parents' faces. One day, I told myself, they would hear my name and feel the weight of what they'd thrown away. By spring, I had saved enough to pay rent 3 months ahead. It was a small victory, but it felt huge. For the first time, I could breathe without the constant panic of the next bill. Security, fragile, but mine. Philadelphia was no longer just a city to me. It was a proving ground. Every cracked sidewalk, every sleepless night, every shift behind the counter was shaping me. And I was beginning to see that I wasn't just surviving. I was changing. Chapter 3, The Road Alone. By my second year in the city, I had stopped expecting help from anyone. It wasn't bitterness. It was adaptation. When no one comes to catch you, you learn to land on your feet. And I was learning fast. I kept my schedule packed. Morning shifts at the cafe, lectures in the afternoon, library shifts at night. If I was busy enough, I didn't have time to feel the gap where family should have been. My friends on campus were friendly, but distant. They had parents sending care packages, calling every weekend. I never told them I hadn't spoken to mine in months. It felt easier to let them assume I was just independent. Independence sounded noble. In reality, it meant fixing your own sink, hauling groceries alone in the rain, and eating dinner standing at the counter because there wasn't time to sit. But I wore it like armor. There were days my energy ran out completely. I'd drag myself into my room after midnight, drop my bag, and collapse without turning on the light. The city hummed outside, but inside it was just me and the quiet. I started keeping a journal. Not for memories, I didn't want to remember most days, but for tracking progress. Every milestone went in there: bills paid, grades earned, shifts covered. It was proof I was moving forward. Some nights, I'd reread those pages. On the bad days, they reminded me how far I'd already come. On the good days, they reminded me this was only the beginning. I avoided my hometown. Even when classmates went home for the holidays, I stayed in Philadelphia. The city didn't ask questions when you were alone. It just absorbed you. That was a kind of safety I hadn't known before. I threw myself into academics. If I couldn't have their approval, I'd take the world's. Every paper was triple-checked, every project turned in early. Professors started knowing my name. One professor in particular, Dr. Howard, noticed my work. He pulled me aside after class one day and suggested I apply for a competitive internship. His belief in me was quiet, steady, and it lit a spark I hadn't felt in years. The internship paid modestly, but offered connections money couldn't buy. I took it without hesitation. It meant longer days and shorter nights, but I didn't care. Every step forward felt like proof I was building something no one could take from me. Meanwhile, my parents' absence became part of the background noise. I didn't expect birthday calls. I didn't expect congratulations. The silence was predictable, almost comfortable. But every now and then, it hit me. Like when a coworker's mom brought in cookies, just because. Or when a classmate's dad came to watch their presentation. Those moments were quick punches to the ribs. I didn't let them see it. Instead, I worked harder. I built my identity on what I could achieve, not who would show up for me. If no one else would witness my growth, I'd make the results impossible to ignore. My savings grew slowly. Every extra dollar went into the same envelope under my bed. It wasn't much, but it was mine, a small shield against the world's unpredictability. By the time I graduated, I had a resume that looked like it belonged to someone with a full support system. Multiple jobs, high grades, impressive internships. But every line was built from hours no one else saw. That's the thing about walking the road alone. Every step feels heavier, but the weight builds muscle you didn't know you had. And that muscle? One day, it's what carries you to the top. And I was starting to see the summit in the distance. I didn't know yet what it would look like when I got there. But I knew one thing for certain. If they ever saw it, they'd know they had nothing to do with it. Chapter 4. The Summit I Dreamed of. It started with an email. Subject line: Nomination for National Achievement Award. I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. But when I opened it, my hands began to shake. They were inviting me to a gala in New York City. The award recognized leaders under 30 making a national impact in their field. My project had grown from a class assignment into a nonprofit initiative helping low-income communities access vital resources. And someone had noticed. I read the email 3 times before it sank in. This wasn't a dream. It was happening. And for the first time, I thought about my parents. Not with longing, but with precision. I knew exactly how I wanted them to see me now. I sent them formal invitations, the same as the other guests. No note, no explanation. Just their names printed in gold script, the event details below. Let them wonder. Preparation became my full-time focus. I bought a dress that made me feel unshakable. Sleek black, floor length, with a subtle shimmer under the lights. The kind of dress you wear when you're not asking for permission to belong. I worked with my team to refine my acceptance speech. It wasn't just a thank you, it was my story, reshaped into something powerful. a narrative of resilience, of turning absence into fuel. It was honest, but measured. The night before the gala, I barely slept. I wasn't nervous about the stage or the cameras. I was thinking about the moment my parents would see me, not as the child they abandoned, but as the woman they couldn't stop. The gala was at a grand hotel ballroom, ceilings glittering with chandeliers. The air was warm with perfume, the clink of glasses, the quiet murmur of wealth. My heels clicked against the marble as I walked in. Every step was deliberate. I spotted them almost instantly. They were seated near the front, just a few tables away from mine. My mother's hair was perfectly styled, my father in a pressed suit. They looked exactly as I remembered, and not at all. Our eyes met briefly. Her smile was polite but uncertain. His expression was unreadable. I gave a small nod, nothing more, and turned to greet other guests. It was my night, not theirs. Dinner passed in a blur. I spoke with donors, reporters, and other honorees. Every compliment, every handshake, felt like another layer of armor. The closer we got to the awards, the steadier I felt. When my name was called, the room erupted in applause. I walked to the stage, the lights hot against my skin. The award felt heavy in my hands, solid, real. I took a breath and began. I thanked my mentors, my colleagues, the communities we served. I thanked friends who became family, and strangers whose kindness kept me going. Every name was deliberate, every omission louder than words. Their names were never spoken. I closed with a line I'd practiced for weeks. To those who believed in me, thank you. To those who left, you taught me how to stand alone, and I stand here tonight because I learned. The room was silent for a beat before applause thundered back. From the stage, I could see my parents clearly. My mother's smile had faltered. My father was staring at the tablecloth. For the first time, I felt no pull toward them, only a quiet satisfaction. As I left the stage, people reached out to shake my hand, to congratulate me. Photographers called my name. My parents stayed seated. Neither made a move to approach, and I didn't go to them. That night, in my hotel room overlooking the city lights, I set the award on the desk and poured a glass of champagne. The room was silent, except for my heartbeat. I had reached the summit I dreamed of, and they had watched from the sidelines. Chapter 5. Spectators in the front row. The morning after the gala, I woke to my phone buzzing. Messages from colleagues, friends, even strangers who'd seen my speech online. Praise, congratulations, invitations to collaborate. But nothing from my parents. I wasn't surprised. Silence had always been their language when it came to me. But now it didn't sting. It only confirmed that the distance I'd built was the right choice. Still, the image of them sitting there stayed with me. Front row, perfectly dressed, faces tightening with each word I spoke. They had the best seats in the house, yet none of the connection. I remembered the countless events I'd begged them to attend. Debate tournaments, award ceremonies, science fairs. Each time the same excuses: too busy, too tired, not important enough. Now they'd sat through an evening where the world clapped for me. I wondered if they'd expected a reconciliation. Maybe they thought this was my way of extending an olive branch. That after the applause, we'd pose for photos and play the part of a happy family. They didn't know me anymore. In the lobby, I saw them speaking with a journalist. My mother's smile was strained, my father's arms folded. When the reporter spotted me, they waved me over. I walked past without breaking stride. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. For years, I'd stood in the shadows of their approval. Last night, I'd stood in my own light, and I wasn't about to step back into the dark. Back in my room, I replayed the night in my head. Not the speech or the applause, but the look in their eyes. It wasn't pride. It was realization. They finally understood they had no place in this story. That afternoon, I had lunch with 2 other award recipients. Both spoke warmly of their families, who had cheered from the audience, I listened, smiling politely, knowing my path had been different. And I wouldn't trade it now. I took a train back to Philadelphia that evening. The city skyline came into view, and I felt something shift inside me. It was the same city that had tested me, bruised me, and built me. And it had witnessed my rise. At home, I placed the award on the small shelf above my desk. It caught the afternoon light, gleaming against the wall. No family photos surrounded it, just the space I'd claimed for myself. Later, I checked social media. Clips of my speech had gone viral. Comments poured in from people I'd never met, thanking me for speaking the words they wished they could say. It felt like a second standing ovation. One comment stood out. It takes courage to succeed without support, but it takes even more courage to let them watch you do it. I read it twice, feeling the truth of it settle deep. I thought about sending my parents a message, not to reconnect, just to close the loop. But I realized I didn't need to. My life was the message. Over the next weeks, invitations kept coming. Panels, interviews, project collaborations. Each time I stepped into a room, I carried the quiet power of knowing I'd built this without them. Sometimes I imagined them hearing my name on the news or seeing my face in a magazine. Not as a daughter they raised, but as a stranger they once knew. A stranger who no longer looked back. The truth was simple. They were spectators now. Front row or back, it didn't matter. They could watch, but they could never again claim a role in my success. And I'd learned something in that. Spectators don't get to write your story. They just get to witness the ending you chose. Chapter 6. The silence after the applause. The week after the gala felt strangely quiet. No cameras, no stage lights, no hum of a crowd waiting to hear my name. Just the everyday rhythm of the city outside my window. And for once, I welcomed the stillness. I kept the award where I could see it from my desk. It wasn't a trophy to show off. It was a reminder of every late night, every lonely morning, every choice to keep going when no one believed in me. In that silence, memories surfaced. Walking to class in freezing rain, eating dinner alone in my tiny apartment, the ache of hearing other people's families cheer for them. Those moments had built me more than any celebration could. One afternoon, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Inside was a single card. "We're proud of you." No names, no apology, just those 4 words. I set the card down on the counter. For years I'd imagined what it would feel like to hear them say that. And now, faced with it, I felt nothing. It was too little, too late. That was the moment I understood something important. I hadn't been chasing their approval all these years. I'd been chasing the version of myself who no longer needed it. And I'd finally caught her. So I put the card in a drawer, not out of anger, but closure. It could sit there with the other artifacts of a life I'd outgrown. I didn't need to destroy it. It no longer had power over me. Days turned into weeks. Work was steady, my projects expanding faster than I'd dreamed. Every step forward came from my own hands, my own will. It was mine, untainted by their neglect. Occasionally, people asked about my family. I'd answer honestly without bitterness. We don't keep in touch. It wasn't a confession or a wound. It was just a fact. And facts don't hurt when you've made peace with them. The silence from my parents continued. No calls, no visits. But this time, it didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like space. Space I could fill with people who chose me. I spent that space well. Dinners with friends who'd become my chosen family. Long walks through the city, remembering when I couldn't afford to slow down. Moments of stillness I once thought I didn't deserve. The night of the gala stayed with me, but not for the reasons I'd expected. It wasn't the applause I remembered most. It was the calm I felt walking off the stage, like I'd just set down a weight I'd carried for years. I realized that revenge, in its purest form, isn't loud. It's living in such a way that you no longer need to think about the people who doubted you. It's thriving without them in your orbit. And maybe that's why the silence after the applause felt so right. It wasn't empty, it was full. Full of every moment I'd built on my own. Every victory I'd claimed without their hands guiding me. One evening, I stood by my window, watching the city lights flicker against the dark. Somewhere out there, my parents were living their lives. Maybe they thought about me. Maybe they didn't. Either way, I was fine, because the truth was, they'd abandoned me once, but I'd abandoned the need for them forever. And that was the real ending to our story. The applause had ended, the lights were off, but my life, the one I'd fought for, was just beginning. And this time, I wasn't performing for anyone but myself.